Hello, Mr. Farage. My name is Benjamin Schrader from Texas A&M University, and I have to say I'm one of your biggest fans in the world. For sure, you're amazing. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you think will be the next country to leave the EU?
Right. Yeah, this is really a gambling question, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Well, okay. It won't be Germany. Because after all, why would you want to leave something that you're now virtually totally in control of? And, I mean, it is amazing. When the euro crisis hit back in 2008, the people running the European Club, people like Mr. Barroso, the former Maoist and former Portuguese Prime Minister, who, as I pointed out to him repeatedly in my helpful interventions in the European Parliament, that he was unelected, and he never liked that. But the truth is that when the euro crisis hit, when the banking crisis hit, the world looked to the only European leader who frankly had any authority, and that was Mrs. Merkel, not the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. Now, I think in many ways, since that date, Mrs. Merkel has made one truly catastrophic error. And just to say, as many of you that want to come into the European Union, you're all welcome, we can cope, without having any ability or any means to security clear a single one of them, I think will go down as one of the great historical mistakes, and I think will lead over the next decades, to a great deal of misery in many parts of Europe. And what an irony that over the course of the last couple of days, the EU have changed the rules for getting security cleared in airports. So reputedly in Mallorca the other day, it was taking 3 hours to check on to an aeroplane because the EU say they're now getting tough with terrorism, but if you come on a rickety boat from North Africa, then there's no problem. I mean, you couldn't invent some of this stuff. It won't be Germany, and it won't be France either. What I think is important to explain to an American audience is this. You know, in 1870, the newly unified Germany under Bismarck marches, crosses the Rhine, and causes a war. That very same country, in 1914, breaches Belgian neutrality that leads, of course, inevitably to the First World War. And then in 1940, they come and do it all again. I mean, 3 times in the space of a 310 lifespan of an ordinary person, the Germans come across the Rhine with bad intent. So, the actual idea after 1945 that France and Germany should sit down together and break bread and start to become friends and start to trade with each other is something that no sane human being could ever think was a bad idea. The problem with the European project is that it thought that war had been caused by the existence of nation state, and therefore the objective was to abolish nation state, but never to tell the participating peoples that that was actually the plan. So friendship, trade, cooperation, you know, being good neighbours, all of that makes a great deal of sense. However, the argument that because we have the European Union, there's been no war, is an argument which, I mean, frankly, I think it's ludicrous. I mean, were the Germans going to come again? But are they that bad a people? You know, I mean, you know, the answer is that Germany was smashed into total submission and absolute humiliation in 1945, and that country now and its leaders have an entirely different mindset. This is no longer a militaristic nation. It doesn't pose a military, might pose an economic, but it doesn't pose a military threat to anybody. But that argument still Still, I would say to you that in France and in Germany and perhaps in Belgium, not that I'm always very nice about Belgium, but there we are, that argument still has some resonance. However, if I had to pick the big country that I thought was the joker in the pack, it is Italy. Why? Why? The Italians, in the First World War, supported us. And then in the Second World War, they started off supporting the Germans, and then they split, and half fought with us and half fought with the Germans. For Italy, there is no emotional, historical attachment to this idea of joining together because of war, because they're not, as a nation, emotionally tied to either side of this very long-running dispute that went on for 75 years, you know, across Rhineland, Europe. That's point number one. Point number two is that economically, the euro has been a disaster. There has been no growth in Italy, folks, for 20 years. No growth in Italy for 20 years. Youth unemployment in Italy is now touching 40%. This isn't working. So the economics aren't working. And thirdly, they are a Mediterranean people. And I think for them, arguments about being safe and sensible and secure have far less resonance than they would in the cooler northern climes of Scandinavia or Northern Europe. And I think if there's a shock coming, if there's a major shock coming from a big country, Italy is top of my list. Right now, folks, in the opinion polls in Italy, a man called Beppe Grillo, who is the best-known stand-up comedian in Italy, is currently in the lead in the opinion polls. It's quite tough to tell who the jokers are now, isn't it? There will be general elections in Italy will take place at the latest in February of next year, and I think you're going to see a very Eurosceptic parliament in Italy. I'm not saying they'll leave quickly, but I think inevitably Italy is moving towards leaving. The one country that should have left years ago is Greece. And I think for anybody that believes in democracy, I think the way that the little Greeks have been crushed, not just by the European Union, the IMF here in Washington have also played a shameful role, in my opinion. You know, if you vote for a government, it's not up to international authorities to say they can't put in place their manifesto. And you know, the Greek economy has now contracted by 28% since 2008. Even at the depths of the American Depression in the 1930s, the maximum fall of the economy from top to bottom was 16%. In Greece, it's fallen 28%. So I think, look out for the Mediterranean. I think there are major shocks to come. I mean, I will say this to you and to all of you. They all say in Europe now, oh, it's okay. It's all going to be fine. The populist wave of 2016 is over. Just look at France. Monsieur Macron has won in France, which proves that our European supranational project is back on track. What they don't look at is that in the first round of the French presidential elections, 47% of people voted for candidates who were basically secessionists, something that was unthought of. And look at the east of Europe. Look at Hungary. In fact, a very famous British commentator, political commentator called Andrew Marr, he said, if you look at the statements of the prime ministers of Hungary, Poland, Slovakia and the Czech Republic, he said they make Nigel Farage sound like a Foreign Office diplomat. and these are countries that have lived under communism, that have lived under Nazism, that have lived under totalitarian regimes. And when that wall came down, and what a great line of Ronnie's that was, tear down this wall. I mean, it really was, wasn't it? It really, really was.